And here we are, Father. We're live, mic'd. It's been a couple weeks.
It has been a couple weeks. I was away on retreat.
Yep, trying to think of a word for it. Maybe the sublime Father Rossi. Here we are. Now, what was the adjective for Esau? Do you remember Esau? Of course, I know you remember Esau. There was an adjective. Maybe I'm thinking in the King James Version. You know, because he was the man of the earth and the hunter. Ruddy. That was it.
Ruddy. I guess I'm ready. I don't know. Am I ready?
Rossi. I don't even know really what that word
Ruddy
means.
Rossi.
Yeah. So how have you been the last couple of weeks?
Been very well.
Quick update.
Enjoying the fall weather.
Yeah.
Yes, enjoying it very much, and lots to read and study from the Holy Father in the past 2 weeks.
I can't wait till we get to that. We did not record last week. I was on did a little talk, a couple of talks for a parish in Minnesota before the grand relics of Saint Therese of Lisieux.
So say a word about that experience.
It was one of the great highlights of my life. She's my patron saint. Many people have heard me. They know my relationship with her, and the priest at this parish about a year ago invited me to come speak, and I was just marveling that here I was before the relics of my patron and her mother and father, Louis and Zélie, the first canonized married couple.
Mm-hmm. And canonized together at the same time.
Canonized at the same time, and just to be before them, I just kept thinking the whole time, like, how did I get here? How did I get here? And it was just, for me, it was just an amazing moment of God's providence, because not only did I have to encounter her writings when I was a student at a Protestant seminary. You know, I had to study them while I was a Methodist pastor, and then that turns into a video I did with a friend of mine, which turns into, it's just, I was just marveling at how it all conspired to bring me into that spot. So I spent a couple of days with this great parish, St. Therese in Deep Haven, Minnesota. Beautiful area. I've never been there. Just gorgeous.
Wow.
And talk about creation and all of its beauty.
Yeah, let's talk
near
about that.
Lake Minnetonka, just a gorgeous area. And gave a talk. The first talk was to some youth, where I just distilled some of the insights of Therese that really inspired me when I encountered her. I encountered her writings many years ago. And then the second talk, I tried to connect all the Marian parallels in her life, trying to make all these connections. Like, has anybody ever really saw this? Or has anyone ever really seen this before? And then I confessed to them that, thankfully, I was not the only one to see this, because I did find this out later. Thank goodness, because I don't want to be a heretic, because heretics are original. But that was my second talk. There was exhibits there. It was open to the public. It was remarkable. So thank you, St. Michael and Father Rossi, for letting me experience that profound moment in my life.
Praise the Lord. Well.
And then the Pope writes an apostolic exhortation.
While you were gone.
While I was gone. He used my notes. So I was so happy. Sure, Holy Father, you can use that. So that was on Sunday, and maybe we can talk about that exhortation another time. So what we're going to talk about today is the exhortation that he published, about 3 weeks ago, Laudate Deum. And to have a conversation with this, let me ask you this, Father. How would you describe, we're talking very general right now, when you read this the first time, how did Pope Francis's tone strike you?
Very sobering, and I don't want to say alarmist in a negative way, but I think he's speaking with the tone of alarm. And I've read this exhortation and thought to myself, I've never heard a pope write this way or speak this way in the past. Again, I'm trying to be way more plugged into the things in which he is writing and releasing officially. I'm trying to get out of the ideology of the news media that are telling me exactly how I should think and feel about what he is or isn't doing, or writing and isn't writing. So instead of, and I heard this was released during my priest retreat, and a couple little comments about it, but I didn't look up any news or any commentary on it. Even at Catholic sources, I just said I'm going to read it myself. God gave me a brain, and I'm going to try and use it. So I read through it, and it's short and very much to the point. Basically, the language of climate crisis comes through and seems to have a lot of scientific foundation to it, which I'm sure there's plenty of critiques going on about that. But I think that it uncovers a reality that there really is a lot of ideology and I think we're going to get there today. But I found it intriguing and challenging because I haven't really been thinking with the mind of which he's trying to get me to think with. I don't live as a Catholic with a great concern for creation. Not that I love creation, but I have to say that I've been formed by my upbringing in this country, and the creation is sort of a nice background for the existence of life. And if businesses are to grow and houses are to be built and money's to be made, I haven't been brought up in a way that gives much more thought to what this will do to creation or a community, for example. I'm not saying how we do things in our country is always bad. I just think that he's bringing up a relationship that I haven't been as aware of. That I know I'm part of creation, humanity, and I know the 6 days of creation and Genesis, and so we're aware of all of that. We sing, all creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and with us sing. The hymn of St. Francis, which calls out different aspects of creation. We sing that in praise of God, and I'm not sure it clicks that we understand, but they really are praising God. Creation, all of creation really is, involved in God's plan of redemption, not just this war between humanity and the angels and the demons.
Yeah, we definitely need to get into that.
Right.
That it is much more comprehensive. When we talk about matters of salvation and soteriology, the Bible is very clear on this, and sacred tradition, that we are anticipating the redemption of all creation, the whole cosmos. So this was a follow-up really to his encyclical Laudato Si, which
I haven't read carefully, so I can say I read it probably in a cursory way.
Yeah,
maybe that's not the right word, but I didn't read it carefully when it first came out years ago. Right. So I will be going back to it because obviously it's leading. This is on a fruit of that or connected to that. This exhortation, Laudate Deum.
That's right. And in Laudato Si, we have his comprehensive understanding of our interconnection with the things of creation and our treatment of the world. But what he does in Laudato Si that is very good is he connects it to the Eucharist. I don't know, that's pretty deep as just starting out, but we have to have a Eucharistic understanding of creation and where it's going, which is its complete transfiguration and restoration.
So that's a good point. Before you go off of that, I think just restate what we said about a Eucharistic.
Okay, so what he's getting at here in Laudato Si ultimately is that when the bread and the wine is brought to you, and you say in the Eucharistic liturgy, the work of human hands. Mm-hmm. So we're taking the stuff of creation.
Yeah, we say, blessed are you, Lord God of all creation.
Of all creation.
For through your goodness we have received the bread we offer you, fruit of the earth and work of human hands.
Yes. So you have a created substance, which is a representation of creation itself. It came from that. Man and woman is a microcosm of creation. I mean, even chemists will tell you that the chemical compounds in the universe pretty much follow in succession in the human body as well. So we take what is a microcosm of creation, the bread, the wheat, the fruit of the earth, and what happens is that in the hands of the priest and by the power of the Holy Spirit, they become the body and blood of Christ. They are transubstantiated. And that in that moment is a snapshot, it's a glimpse, it's a foretaste of what all of creation itself is going to become.
A new creation. So we're not talking about just human persons becoming a new creation, being fully what they were intended to be, but creation itself. And if we reflect on St. Paul, doesn't St. Paul say, all creation groans in labor pains?
And shall be redeemed, is what Paul says. So most people will automatically pigeonhole this and, well, this is a political issue. It might be if you're not Catholic. Mm-hmm. But if you are a Catholic, or I would say even a Christian, this is a theological matter. This is a biblical matter, because Paul and really the rest of the New Testament, just read Revelation chapter 21, 22, all of creation shall be redeemed. It's not just my soul going to heaven.
Right.
What we await are a new heaven and a new earth, by which the biblical writers understand the coming together at long last of heaven and earth, and all of creation will be transfigured, and it will become God's own temple. So we can't, as Catholics, say, well, it doesn't really matter what we do on earth because we're going to go floating away into heaven and never to be seen again.
Right.
Here. That's false. That's Greco-Roman understanding of.
And I think also the difficulty that we can have a myopic vision of creation, our relationship with creation, and God's plan for redemption for all of creation is that we can sort of think the world's just a burning warehouse, and then those who are saved are just going to come running out of that fire, and God's just going to step back, and at the end of time, is going to watch that puppy burn to the ground. And well, okay, now that it's all destroyed, we'll just start from scratch. Mm-hmm. That really, if you look at the Old Testament, Noah and the ark, what was so important about that? Why didn't he just save the human family? But every species had to be present. There was this all of creation, and then when they build the temple in Jerusalem, isn't it configured with imagery from creation?
All the imagery, yes.
All the imagery of like grapevines and wheat, or I don't really remember
Stars, the moon,
right.
The sun, oxen, all of them. And remember, in biblical Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, on the Sabbath day, it wasn't just human beings who got a chance to rest. The animals rested, and the land was supposed to rest as well. And the land was supposed to rest every 7 years because it was a God-ordained way of saying that the earth has limits. And you can exhaust those limits, and it too needs to rest. But now we are under the presumption that Pope Francis speaks of here in the encyclical that we can get into a little bit later, that we have succumbed to believing in the myth of endless growth, and endless consumption,
yes,
and an unlimited notion of a finite creation, which is false.
Right. So the Holy Father writes this apostolic exhortation on what he calls the climate crisis. Now, already that language is charged in our nation with ideology and polemical responses. So someone says, and we dealt with this in the past. We heard a priest say, if the Holy Father speaks on certain things, he's not speaking as the Pope. He's only speaking as Jorge Bergoglio, and we don't owe him any allegiance, zero allegiance when he speaks on, and I don't know if he used the example of the economy, but I think he used the environment as well. So we'll just say, okay, let's see. Can the Holy Father talk about the environment? And let's make the point that we need to be very careful using that word, probably best to use the word creation. So in the Catechism, paragraph 2415 reads, this is under the section on the seventh commandment, respect for the integrity of creation. The Catechism says, so this is the voice of the Church, the seventh commandment enjoins respect for the integrity of creation. Animals, like plants and inanimate beings, are by nature destined for the common good of past, present, and future humanity. Use of the mineral, vegetable, and animal resources of the universe cannot be divorced from respect for moral imperatives. Man's dominion over inanimate and other living beings granted by the Creator is not absolute. It is limited by concern for the quality of life for his neighbor, including generations to come. It requires a religious respect for the integrity of creation. That one paragraph basically summarizes, in my opinion, what the Holy Father is doing in this exhortation. What he's been doing in his pontificate is that we have been polarized. So when someone speaks about the environment, they're a liberal. You know, they hug trees and eat granola, or I don't know, whatever, you know, goofy labels and prejudices we have. But the Holy Father absolutely can and should and must speak on the moral implications of the way we live and act and treat creation. And in the paragraph here, what guides our treatment of creation? Man's dominion is not absolute. It's limited for concern for the quality of life for his neighbor. So the respect for the dignity of the human person, the respect for life, respect of life, pro-life, including generations to come. What is pro-life about? The generation to come, the unborn generation. The unborn generation in the womb is what drives the pro-life movement, the dignity of the human person. The dignity of the human person cannot be divorced from the greater care of creation, because man and woman are really the epitome of God's visible creation. And when and the Holy Father made this point, I do remember this from Laudato Si, that without a greater understanding and love for all of creation, we won't get to a world that respects the unborn child. Because if all things are malleable and can be manipulated by commerce, I mean, what is one of the main reasons why there's abortion? People are afraid of financial strain and hardship of life for raising a child, that's all related. And I think that's the Catholic mind, is everything's connected and everything's related. And we suffer from, centuries ago, the Enlightenment, the divorcing of the body, the compartmentalization, rather, the body and the soul, and the material world being viewed as, we can be dangerously Gnostic, with the dualistic, rather, that the material world is bad, or I'm indifferent towards it. And in our culture today, we could say we treat the world only from a pragmatic standpoint. It's valuable insofar as it's useful to me, and if it's not useful to me, then
it's disposable.
Right, which is what he said in Laudato Si. This disposable culture, the infant in the womb is disposable. Mm-hmm. And that is a result of living in this paradigm of that I am the master of my own sea in all of creation, and man can just dispose of anything. If I can mow down a forest, that is related to I don't care about life in the womb. And so neither person on the far left or the far right would be happy with this exhortation. For those that say protecting life in the womb is most important, it is paramount, and the Church has already said that in the past with John Paul II. And the protection of the life of the unborn child in the womb is paramount. It is, it's not the same as as saving a tree or saving bats or saving whales. It's not the same. But there is still a connection, because the human person and all of those, as we just said, are all related to one another. They are connected. They're all part of God's creation. And so we care for the care for creation overall should be flowing from our care and love for the dignity of the human person.
That's exactly right. And we can't really care for creation until we care about the person as well.
Yeah.
There's a connection. I want you to go back to the how you began. You said it would be better for us to use the word creation.
Yes.
As opposed to nature and environment. And
right.
The Pope actually insinuates as much in his writings. Let's stop calling it the environment. Let's stop calling it nature. Why?
Because it draws us to the biblical reality of the Creator, that none of us made this planet, universe, right? And that we have to be careful, because in the environmentalist movements, and even in our own country, and the Holy Father does touch on this in this letter about, it cannot be human versus nature. Right. That's the paradigm that's set up, where the environmentalists say there's too many humans. Abortion is the tool to saving the planet. And there's an article you and I read together, by in Environmental Education, What a Christian Environmental Ethic Looks Like, by Christopher Barnard. And in that, he touches on that, I don't know the author there. He mentions Sanders. That's the last name. Some environmentalists echoing Sanders, I don't know who this would be, comments to go so far as arguing that abortion is the key tool in the fight against climate change. which is absurd. So, but if the Holy Father and the Catholic minds continue to, this Holy Father's not doing that, and Benedict and John Paul didn't either. They all, I think we learned that they've been speaking and writing and teaching in this way. But if we as Catholics keep polarizing this issue and saying that when the Pope speaks this way, he must just be a leftist Pope, and if he speaks not and teaches not and guides not in this region, then the leftist pro-abortion groups that are concerned about the environment, which is a part of the common good, but it's totally distorted. And those are the predominant voices. So if we just keep throwing this up to, well, this is the leftist stuff we shouldn't be worrying about, then you only allow the advancement of that environmentalist, radicalist
depopulation.
Yeah, and the Holy Father does say in this letter, that's not the answer.
Right. And I also appreciated that he said that even if we take for a second that, those who say, well, we don't have the evidence that climate change is man-made, he makes it very clear right out of the gates, that's not the point here.
Right.
The point here is I'm not trying to determine whether climate change is man-made or not. The reality is we've got issues happening to creation, and we are connected to it, and as Catholics, we have a moral obligation to care. So wouldn't that lead me to believe then, Father, that although this is not an encyclical, he was not speaking from the throne, from the chair, he is still speaking on a matter of faith and morals. Well, he's calling us to moral action, so he's still speaking with the ordinary magisterium, which means we need to pay attention to this is our Holy Father speaking.
And this is the teaching office of the pontiff, very clearly. So to quibble about, was it an encyclical, an apostolic exhortation, apostolic letter, or what is it? He has written and addressed and signed a teaching. This is a teaching that he has it's in his realm to speak on this, because the Catechism has already shown that that's the case. So he's just furthering the understanding of what paragraph 2415 says and others in the Catechism. But I was trying to find that quote where he was talking about, the overpopulation and how those are wrong manners of considering solutions for the climate crisis.
While you look for that, one of the things he does, he starts out by mentioning some of the things that we are seeing. Heat waves are more frequent, extreme flooding is more frequent, great rains are more frequent. And he says in paragraph 6, in recent years, some have chosen to deride these facts. They bring up allegedly solid scientific data, like the fact that the planets have always had and will have periods of cooling and warming. They forget to mention another relevant datum, that what we are presently experiencing is an unusual acceleration of warming, at such a speed that it will take only one generation, not centuries or millennia, in order to verify it. One of the things you find in the Old Testament, this is in the Jewish mind, this is ancient Judaism, you must always care about the children and the children's children. You're always thinking ahead to the next generation. That's exactly how the biblical mind worked. What are we going to be leaving behind? And so what Pope Francis is doing here is clearly biblical. Let's get away from the political conversation. What kind of world are our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren going to inherit? We have an obligation to care for that.
Yeah. I think that is probably one of the pillars of the teaching.
Exactly. He says, in order to ridicule those who speak of global warming, it is pointed out that intermittent periods of extreme cold regularly occur. One fails to mention that this and other extraordinary symptoms provoking the warming of the planet, droughts and floods, the dried up lakes, communities swept away by sea quakes, and flooding ultimately have the same origin. At the same time, if we speak of a global phenomenon, we cannot confuse this with sporadic events explained in good part by local factors. And then he says this, in an attempt to simplify, there are those who would place responsibility on the poor. And that's going back to your point. Since they have many children, and even attempt to resolve the problem by mutilating women in less developed countries. As usual, it would seem that everything is the fault of the poor. And then he asks, how can we forget that Africa, home to more than half the world's poorest people, is responsible for a minimal portion of historic emissions. Where you're finding most of the emissions are in really the countries that are they are depopularizing and are the ones who are the greatest consumers. It's not the poor. So I really appreciate it. I mean, it's provocative for him to say, but let's not blame the poor countries or the poor itself, because they're the ones who are by and large having to bear the brunt of the excesses of Western developed countries.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the analogies I thought of was, if it's difficult for us as American Catholics to receive this teaching because we are so politicized, and we just need to admit it over and over again that we wear the political glasses and the glasses of ideology a lot more than we'd like to admit. But if I was just in the Appalachian Mountains for the priest retreat a few weeks ago, which we go there every year, and it's beautiful. The leaves change, cars go out there, people go in droves to see the colors change, right? Stay in the mountains, whatever. What if Canada decided to build some industrial something near the border of our country, and over time, for whatever reason, environmental climate change began to be noticed that began to harm the Appalachian Mountains,
or the ecosystems around
whatever, and it began to, if you don't have the Appalachian Mountains with the colors changing, and the air quality becomes poor, well, then it's not just that the animals and trees will begin to die off or whatever, I'm just making this up. Well, then no one will go there for tourism. People will move away. People will lose their jobs because nearly everything out there is based on the fact that people go to the Blue Ridge Parkway to see the Smoky Mountains, to see the beauty. And if that was being harmed and it began to deteriorate because of another nation's choices, well, then what right would we have? What would we do as the United States? Well, hey, Canada, stop doing that. It's hurting this over here. Well, does Canada, do they have to stop? I mean, this is Canada, bud.
Right.
Back out.
Right.
Go back to your own country.
Right.
So, or, oh my goodness, you're right, the environment, the creation rather, is, wow, we don't want to ruin your land.
Right.
We are ruining your land. It's been seen that we are.
Right.
So those are simple examples. And think of anything that we enjoy, beaches, fishing, lakes. What are the things people enjoy doing outside? And if no one enjoys going out, if someone doesn't enjoy going outside, well, then you've already been too isolated from creation.
But the isolation is exactly what he gets to, and I'll just go ahead and bring this up. What he calls this is the technocratic paradigm. So this begins on paragraph 20. Now, he really goes into this more in Laudate Deum, the technocratic paradigm. And I'll read a couple of sentences and then just kind of sum it up. In Laudate Deum, I offered a brief resume of the technocratic paradigm underlying the current process of environmental decay. It is a, quote, certain way of understanding human life and activity that has gone awry to the serious detriment of the world around us. Deep down, it consists in thinking as if reality, goodness, and truth automatically flow from technological and economic power as such. As a logical consequence, it then becomes easy to accept the idea of infinite or unlimited growth, which proves so attractive to economists, financiers, and experts in technology. So basically what the technocratic paradigm is that the very technology we're using to really damage the environment, we think is going to save us. Mm-hmm. And so we don't really need to invest so much effort on our individual part, because technology we will find a solution. The problem, he says, with that in Laudate Deum is that you've got to bear in mind who controls the mechanisms of that power. It's usually always in the hand of a select few who have different interests. They have financial interests and market interests, and not the interests of necessarily the communities around them. So it is this myth to believe that technology, in the end, will find a way to save us. And he's calling us out on that and saying that's a myth, that's a fantasy. This is going to require the effort of all of us. And what it's really going to require for all of us is, can I say it? Lifestyle change. And he gets to that point here on paragraph 13. Regrettably, the climate crisis is not exactly a matter that interests the great economic powers, whose concern is with the greatest profit possible at minimal cost and in the shortest amount of time.
Right.
Are we really, really ready to change our lifestyle for the sake of the human person and the creation to which we are all connected? That's the ultimate question for us in the West and really around the world.
Yeah, it seems that Christians are being challenged to change their lifestyle.
That's exactly what
because non-Christian, I mean, I don't see people changing their lifestyle with this, unless they're Christian.
Right.
Because, well, why should I?
Yep.
And who says who? So if Christians change their lifestyle, then that can transform. That's always what transforms the world, because people see, why are you living in this way? Why does this lifestyle something you're embracing? Well, because I'm a follower of Christ.
Right.
And yes, even my living in the midst of creation is different.
Well, you think about the Lord of the Rings, the hobbits. When you saw their scenes, it was very picturesque and beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They were integrated in their environment. And then is it Sauron? Mm-hmm. The armies of Sauron, the evil. And what were they doing to build their weapons? They were just destroying the trees and just leveling everything. I mean, that was J.R.R. Tolkien's little prophetic way of looking at what evil looks like or can look like. It destroys. Mm-hmm. Whereas the hobbits, the virtuous ones, were very much integrated with their environment, and it was not destructive at all. They lived within limits. They lived within limits. So it really is going to have to come down to...
That's a good way of saying it, just living within limits. And what does that mean? I mean, does that mean everyone's supposed to get an electric car? And, I mean, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't think the Holy Father is even suggesting he has the specific answers. I think he's just saying we have to work at finding ways and use the ethic of protecting and caring for creation for the generations to come. See, this might be a great product, this might be a great thing, but what does this mean 100 years down the road? Well, what it means is you're not going to have any more rivers over here, or the mining of this whatever is going to cause this down the road. Well, that's fine. I'll be long gone when that happens. Yep. Yeah, you will be, and everyone after you won't be, and they'll inherit what you've left behind. So, yeah, that's the paragraph 22. Without a doubt, the natural resources required by technology. I don't think about that. I don't think about natural resources required for technology. I think we just think machines keep making machines, which make more machines.
Because machines will ultimately
save us. Yes.
Which he does not. Of course, the Catholic Church and the Pope Francis, he is all very much for technology.
Sure.
But we have to regulate technology with virtue.
But he goes on in 22, without a doubt, natural resources required by technology, such as lithium, silicon, and so many others, are not unlimited. Yet the greater problem is the ideology underlining an obsession, which is to increase human power beyond anything imaginable. Now, who would disagree with that? I mean, if you're really paying attention to the world and what AI is it's a marvel, but it's also, in my opinion, scary. To increase human power beyond anything imaginable, before which non-human reality is a mere resource at its disposal. Everything that exists ceases to be a gift for which we should be thankful, esteem, and cherish, and instead become a slave, prey to any whim of the human mind and its capacities. I mean, what dictates whether we should do something? Well, just because somebody wants to and has the means of money to do so. There's no ethic there.
That's right. There's an ethic. It's just driven by other forces other than virtue. It's usually, according to Francis, driven by profit motives.
Yeah.
And development motives. And then in paragraph 23, it is chilling to realize that the capacities expanded by technology have given those with the knowledge, and especially the economic resources to use them, an impressive dominance over the whole of humanity and the entire world. Never has humanity had such power over itself, yet nothing ensures that it will be used wisely, particularly when we consider how it is currently being used. In whose hands does all this power lie, or will it eventually end up? It is extremely risky for a small part of humanity to have it. That's his issue. The technocratic paradigm is the concentration of all this power into the hands of a select few, or you could say a corporation. And yet they're the very people who can shape the imagination. They're the ones making the commercials. Mm-hmm. They're the ones creating the domains that really can affect us. And as Catholics, we have to be critical enough to step back and with a biblical lens to be able to read this theologically to see where the problems lie here. So that's really what Pope Francis is trying to do, is can we take a step back and see how we're kind of in a hypnotic trance here, and we're not really taking seriously or critically the vast amount of power that these mega corporations, some of them are trillion-dollar industries now, have over us and influence us. So that's just one little aside there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he actually says this in paragraph 29. The ethical decadence of real power is disguised thanks to marketing and false information. Useful tools in the hands of those with greater resources to employ them to shape public opinion. What should be shaping Catholic opinion, as Pope says, is the magisterium. But
And the scriptures and the magisterium.
We have to look at the world
the
that
catechism,
way.
Yeah.
Because
we
if
have
you
to
read
have
the Psalms,
a
even
biblical
the
mind.
Psalms, Father.
Yeah.
Notice all the Psalms, like Psalm 66. Creation, the abundance, the meadows, the overflow, the cattle. I mean, all of these speak to the beauty of God. We cannot divorce the theological mind and the imagination from the created order that we see here. And I know that the rabbis, the biblical rabbis, you think about the story of Exodus, the plagues, it was really created things retaliating against Pharaoh and his empire, where the rabbis in the antiquity understood this as when injustice reigns, when evil is allowed to flourish, creation itself will rebel against you. And when creation convulses, pay attention, because injustice is somewhere lying in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Never thought of it that way.
Yes. So we have to read creation itself. And is it convulsing? Yes, in parts of the world it is. Why? It's trying to tell us something.
Sure.
That's the biblical mindset.
The book of creation is, in fact, what many of the church fathers say read. The saints read the book of creation, the book of the scriptures.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But the demands that rise up below. Oh, yes. So how are we going to confront this? Pope Francis does not think in this exhortation that the answer is going to come from the top down. It'll always come from the bottom up, from the grassroots. He says that the demands are going to have to rise up from below. Okay. Throughout the world, where activists from very different countries help and support one another, can end up pressuring the sources of power. So it's going to be up to us here. It's going to be the St. Michael community and the neighborhoods in which we live. We're going to have to take seriously those localities. We can't really think globally on this kind of issue. We have to think locally on this kind of issue. What can we do locally that makes a difference?
Yeah.
Because that's the only place where we can make a difference.
Yep, that makes sense, because you'll be overwhelmed if you try to look at it globally.
Yes. He also talks about some of the accords and the peace treaties. He says, today we can continue to state, in paragraph 52, today we can continue to state that the accords have been poorly implemented due to lack of suitable mechanisms for oversight, periodic review, and penalties in cases of non-compliance. The principles which they proclaimed still await an efficient and flexible means of practical implementation. So the whole exhortation really is, you've talked, and everybody's talked a big talk, but the follow-up, I give you an F.
Right.
We have not done enough, because we think, based on the technocratic paradigm, that somebody, some scientist, is going to come up with a solution so we can go ahead and live our lives as we see fit. And that's exactly what Pope Francis is retaliating against, that kind of mindset among Catholics.
And he gets to moving toward the end with paragraph 62. The Bible tells us God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. Genesis 1:31. He is the earth with all that is in it. Deuteronomy 10:14. There's that Jewish biblical mind. For this reason, he tells us that the land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. With me you were but aliens and tenants. Leviticus 25:23. Hence, responsibility for God's earth means that human beings endowed with intelligence must respect the laws of nature and the delicate equilibria existing between the creatures of this world. So, I mean, there's just a lot. It's not very long, and I would say in the beginning of the encyclical, paragraph 3, he does praise the United States bishops, He says this is a global social issue, this climate crisis, and one intimately related to the dignity of human life. The bishops of the United States have expressed very well this social meaning of our concern about climate change, which goes beyond a merely ecological approach, because, quote, our care for one another and our care for the earth are intimately bound together. So, but what got all the press, of course, was paragraph 72, the closing paragraph, where he says, if we consider that the emissions per individual in the United States are about 2 times greater than those individuals living in China and about 7 times greater than the average poorest countries, we can state that a broad change in the irresponsible lifestyle connected with the Western world, the Western model, would have a significant long-term impact. As a result, along with indispensable political decisions, we would be making progress along the way to genuine care for one another. So he was just saying there. I mean, that was always, of course, taken out of context. That he's slamming the United States, where he's just after us, just making the point that if we made a change in the United States in this regard, it would have a drastic impact. So I don't know what the answer is for that.
He's asking the United States to lead. Right.
But again, if he had said, well, the United States is the highest per capita for abortions, would people be up in arms about that? On different sides, probably. But he can point out faults.
That's right.
And for the basis of, he says, and he ends with the positive, this would be a genuine move along the way for genuine care for one another if the United States leads on this in some way. I don't know how that will be, but he seems to be someone who should point that out.
Right. This Pope has done a brilliant job of helping wake us up to our own tendency to become dualistic in our thinking. You know, heaven, hell, earth, and soul, spirit, body, spirit. That to be a Catholic, we have to understand the incarnation was the joining together of heaven and earth. There was an integrity about it. It was integral, the person of Christ. And that our thinking, we cannot think of nature as something over there,
right,
and I'm something over here. We have to be integrated with one another. So it's really a summons, once again, for Catholics to really be Catholic in their thinking and theological in their thought, that we are joined together. Mm-hmm. As persons, yes, but as animals in a material order that is also going to be redeemed. And we have a responsibility to care for it until the day of its redemption comes in full.
Mm-hmm. He closes with one final sentence. Praise God is the title of this letter, for when human beings claim to take God's place, they become their own worst enemies.
Right. Embrace your limits. So I commend this exhortation to everybody listening. You can get it on the Vatican website. Just Laudate Deum is 14 pages long. Will not take that long.
Right.
And then maybe go from there to Laudato Si, and to really just get into the mind of this Pope, who is calling us to what the Catechism taught before he even became Pope, what John Paul II talked about, what Pope Benedict XVI talked about. He's just taking the baton and carrying it a little bit farther, and he's calling us as Catholics to radical action on this, and we have to care.
Yeah. Well said.
All right. Thank you, Father, for this.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, praise the Lord. And thank you for glad to have you back. It's good to be back. And if you have any questions for us, let us know. Give us a shout here at St. Michael. You can visit our website at stmccg.org. And until next time, stay on the bark of Peter. God bless. Bye-bye.